apply to terminology specifics and legal compliance. So with that, let's get started. Next slide. Each of our clients are distinct and one of a kind. Our dynamic client partnerships allow Effectiff to create both language and financial solutions for the complex and nuanced needs for each and every one of our unique clients. A few details of note about our language tech company. We host a full suite of language access services, which include translation, localization, machine translation, on-site interpretation, language assessments, OPI and VRI, or over the phone and video remote interpreting, respectively. These service lines are key to maintaining compliance and mitigating risk in your organization to fulfill local, state, and federal obligations. All topics we will touch on in this webinar. Next slide. I'd like to present our agenda for today. Please know that if you have questions, you can ask them by hitting that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will dedicate more time to this in the end, of course, during the Q&A session. However, don't hesitate to type a question during the webinar. Just keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. Next slide. To start, we will outline the differences between consecutive, simultaneous, ASL, remote, and on-site interpreting. These are all service modalities that Effectiff provides for sensitive industries, such as but not limited to healthcare, education, public health, law enforcement, and the legal sector, to name a few scenarios. Let's define what these different terms of interpreting mean. Consecutive interpreting, or the most common, is a mode of interpreting in which the speaker makes a speech or says a few sentences whilst the interpreter takes notes. The interpreter then reproduces what the speaker has said for the audience. Simultaneous interpreting. Simultaneous is a mode of interpreting in which the speaker makes a speech and the interpreter reformulates the speech into a language the audience understands at the same time or simultaneously, similar to what is seen in the United Nations and in this image. American Sign Language is a complete natural language that has the same linguistic properties as spoken languages. With grammar that differs from English, ASL is expressed by movements of both the hands and the face. Video remote interpreting. Video remote interpreting is a video telecommunication service that uses devices such as web cameras or video phones to provide sign language or spoken language interpreting services. This is done through a remote or off-site interpreter in order to communicate with persons when there is a communication barrier. Last but not least, on-site interpreting. OSI means that the interpreter is with you on site. The interpreter's task is to interpret everything that is being said as if it were the speaker himself or herself who said it. The interpreter's role is to be an unnoticed filter that is discreetly present and makes what is said understandable. Next slide. As you saw, our agenda contains terms we are familiar with, but sometimes do not fully understand when applied to legal obligations, providing language access to limited English proficient or LEP members of our society, thus creating inclusion of all members of the community. How does one create an organizational language access plan that promotes diversity and inclusion, you ask? Well, step one. Understand and outline your LEPs as well as your organizational culture's needs. Step two, Design your language access plan authentically to match the nuanced needs of your audience. Step 3, leverage technology to facilitate professional, HIPAA-compliant communication between your end users and LEPs. In this webinar, we will discuss various sectors of our societal organizations and potential problems the end users may face when trying to maintain compliance with the law and, of most importance, solutions to support and deploy the steps we just outlined. Next slide. Language access allows for LEPs or limited English proficient individuals to access a wide range of services. As defined by the U.S. Department of Justice or the DOJ, LEP individuals are persons who do not speak English as their primary language and who may have a limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English. In our society, this creates a comprehensively large need for inclusivity resources. Next slide. Imagine yourself depending on interpretation or translation services from someone that kind of sort of speaks the language without knowing the context or terminology required to efficiently create a bridge of understanding. With no prior language evaluation or knowledge of the meaning glossary or terminologies that will be used in the encounter. Sometimes bilingual staff members or bilingual children or even relatives take on the task of interpreting appointments or translating documents. Family members pose a risk factor, not only because of their natural bias, but because their family member or loved one is unwell. This situation will absolutely skew anyone's perspective, no matter what language you speak. Let's say bilingual staff is used instead. They may very well speak the language, but may not have had their language skills assessed or be a subject matter expert. The bilingual employee may not be familiar with the topic, acronyms, or subject matter at hand, like a true specialist. I regret the scenario is all too common and creates risks on both sides of the coin. Next slide. Let's jump right into legalities. Of current note, New Jersey, with a population of over 8 million people, 2 million of which are LEPs, has enacted Bill S-2459. This bill is directly geared towards the state's language access services and has taken effect per the state legislature website, effective immediately after last year's November 8th election day. Translating and interpreting services are now a requirement for services in 15 threshold languages. New Jersey's language access mandate is the largest program of its kind in the United States, a big win for language service equity. Everyone should be able to access basic government services, yet lack of translation on websites and documents, especially when dealing with vital services like unemployment, healthcare, or even registering children for school, creates a barrier for the 2.6 million New Jerseyans who speak a language other than English at home. New Jersey clearly understands that language access is a basic human right that brings social justice to the forefront. Let's hope this trend continues throughout the United States of America. Next slide. The Affordable Care Act has been in effect since the enactment of the ACA in 2010, which incorporates on prior federal civil rights laws to prohibit sex discrimination in healthcare. Section 1557 ensures that those who speak limited English or are variants of the following societal traits: sex and gender, LGBTQ+, race, ethnicity, disability, including pregnancy, stereotyping, and religion. This applies not only to healthcare, but also other corporate activities which receive federal funding. Failure to provide adequate support places your organization at risk for legal action and fines. Next slide. On August 11 of 2000, President George W. Bush II signed Executive Order 13166, which is called Improving Access to Services for Persons with Limited English Proficiency. The executive order requires federal agencies to examine the services they provide, identify any need for services to those with limited English proficiency, and develop and implement a system to provide those services so LEP persons can have meaningful access to them, thus creating social advocacy of a marginalized population. Next slide. All of the mentioned legally binding government bills, acts, and presidential executive orders stem from the civil rights law. The background of the Title VI Civil Rights Act is simply that it was enacted as a legal obligation to all organizations in 1964. That means this is a 59-year-old federally enacted law. Keep that in mind as we continue throughout this presentation. Not to worry here, there won't be any exams at the end of these history lessons. These informational legal reminders are simply for your thought and contemplation of the language access plan you currently have in place. Next slide. When thinking of language access, of course, one is drawn to the traditional definition of interpreting and translating, which one assumes is typically limited only to medical and educational communication. Next slide. Pillars of our society, such as public works infrastructure, utility bills, and banks, are, simply put, another set of social hurdles LEPs must overcome. These are basic, necessary modalities we all need to survive in society. Emergency situations after natural catastrophe, for example, or household products, and even sports require language access. Next slide. Signage, handouts, and newsletters are embedded into our daily lives, which non-LEPs may sometimes take for granted. However, one must keep in mind that signage, handouts, and newsletters are vital communications, which should be shared with all members of the community. Think about it. The signs in the grocery store, signs in the hospital, clinic, or airport, newsletters from a school, and notices from local public works about infrastructure in the community. All of these deserve attention when it comes to language accessibility. Effectiff is your one-stop shop for all document translation services, from translation itself to localization, editing, proofreading, DTP formatting, and much more. All deliverables are performed by subject matter experts, or SMEs, all using cutting-edge technology, providing our client partners with cutting-edge savings. Next slide. Let's turn our attention to the accessibility of digital content on the internet. Leveraging our technology in the translation industry with specialized workflows for each job in a given project, translation of website content into a variety of languages is one of Effectiv's many specialties. These types of translation projects typically require translation, of course, transcreation, and formatting of non-editable text, like you see in the above image. For designers and content creators alike, communication is a key facet of every deliverable content they create. An accessible website to a broadly diverse audience will not only significantly increase page traffic, but it will also serve the LEP community at large. The LEP community is a part of our community, and they are also legally entitled as fellow humans to the understanding and reading of a simple website. Next slide. Schools. Out of all of our societal institutions, I think we can all agree that schools are clearly a vital cornerstone of education and significantly important. Children are typically proficient in speaking English. However, parents may not be, and some children, refugees as one example, are also in the LEP population. Those that require special education are the most vulnerable, especially when it comes to individual education plans or IEPs. Special education students, also known as SPED students, require IEPs triennially at minimum. Next slide. Effectiff is prepared for these educational disparities and able to provide seamless solutions. For example, our school district clients require interpreters on demand, including emergent situations, or during the regular school day. Effectiff provides a solution for these students, parents, and other encounters. We offer on-demand language access to languages of lesser diffusion, or LLDs, which are rare languages to accommodate and support clients. We are able to integrate users district-wide with the large population of the district and manage each accessibility for the end users. In addition, Effectiff amasses a glossary of terminology for SPED IEP encounters as an example. These glossaries are amassed for our medical clients as well. In addition, schools may have an agenda or calendar, which is set for, let's say, for a school year, as an example. Effectiff is able to forecast solutions that will occur in a future state. We can forecast, organize, and prepare your organization for successful encounters with LEPs. Next slide. Clinics and hospitals also utilize language access at an emergent rate. Effectiff is able to examine each organization and assist in the development of a language access plan or improve an existing plan to provide fast, professional, accurate, and meaningful access to the medical services LEPs deserve in over 200 plus languages and dialects at lightning speed. Next slide. Natural disasters, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and wildfires, create an emergent situation as well for LEPs. In these scenarios, a language gap can not only be intense, but deadly. Police stations, fire stations, and other first responders currently utilize Effectiviff's language technology to access a telephonic or video interpreter in just seconds to communicate with LEPs during these emergent situations. As an example, a lesson learned too late are emergency evacuation warnings. Listen to this case study example. In September 2019, an Iranian-born doctoral student was studying construction management at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Though she'd received an email warning from her school about Hurricane Dorian, which had just hit the Bahamas as a Category 5 storm, she had no idea what to expect. The LEP woman, who spoke English very well, still found it tough to translate words. They would still mix her up occasionally. She said she felt unprepared for her encounters with hurricanes and tornadoes, which were not only foreign words, but completely foreign weather phenomena. Definitely scenarios for contemplation. Let's end on a fun note. Sports. Sports are enjoyed the whole world around. World Cup 2022 was held in Qatar, bringing different cultures and languages literally to the world stage. You see, even fun pastimes can have language barriers, which require a bridge of communication. One example is Major League Baseball. In early 2016, Major League Baseball announced it would require each team in the league to recruit and hire a professional interpreter to assist with Spanish to English interpretation for Latin American players and all other LEPs in the league. According to official opening day rosters from 2015, approximately 230 baseball players were born outside of the United States, originating from 17 different countries, which expressed a clear demand to bridge understanding. In short, effective communication engulfs all of our lives in one way or another. Next slide. And this is just a graphic highlighting the World Cup that I hope everyone enjoyed in multi-languages. Next slide. Okay, we have come to the Q&A portion of this presentation. And at this time, feel free to submit your questions utilizing that Q&A button. I'll just give it a few moments while we receive a few more questions. And we'll just allow another few moments. All right, we have one question rolling in. The question states, I've heard the rules around assessing / using bilingual medical staff are more stringent than ever. Any tips? Question mark. Yes, this is true. The rules around language assessment for bilingual medical interpreters are very stringent. And that is something that is brought about by the bills, acts, and legal obligations that protect LEP individuals. So there are different locations or different organizations that will provide a language assessment. But with medical interpretation, it's very important to be medically certified. So that is something that is a huge tip. You want to ensure that prior to even undergoing a language assessment, that your education in the subject matter in the medical field is absolutely up to par. So that's something to keep in mind. And we'll wait a few moments for additional questions as well. Just a few. All right, we have another question. The question states, Is it a requirement to be medically certified for medical appointments? Question mark. If not, how many hours of training are required? Question mark. This is an excellent question. For any types of certification questions, it's very important to refer to the actual agency or organization that you are trying to become certified with. So for example, if you are trying to become CCHI certified, it's very important that you check with CCHI itself as an organization to find out what the specific requirements are to obtain their certification. So this will vary from state to state as well. So it's important to check with the organization that will provide you with the actual certification as far as what their standards are to provide that award. So something for you to keep in mind if you're pursuing medical certification. Very great question. I'll go ahead and stand by for any additional inquiries. These are great questions. Just another quick reminder, feel free to send in your questions. No question is a silly question. We have another question. This question states, while interpreting, sometimes LEP gets angry and uses some abusive words. So in that case, what's a professional interpreter to do? Do I have to say to the English speaker that LEP is using some abusive words, or I have to translate the same way? I'm asking this question because sometimes the English speaker can be female, and being professional and not being professional and feels not appropriate to translate the same words in front of the female. Okay, that's a great question. So ethically, you would need to inform the provider that there is some coarse language that is being stated, and you would need to interpret that as best as possible. But it would be great to inform the provider. And I understand your sensitivity towards females. That's understandable, but clearly understand that in that role, they are a provider first. So they are probably also accustomed to this. So just follow the standard protocol for interpretation in that case. Another question is rolled in. Question: is remote interpreting, phone and video, sufficient to meet needs, or should we also provide on-site interpretation? Great, and great question. So video and telephonic interpreting are sufficient modalities for communication and for bridging understanding between the limited English speaker and the provider in different industries, right? So there are times where video and phone may not be appropriate. For the majority of encounters, it is absolutely does the job and does it very well. But sometimes in delicate situations like end of life, as an example, it may be very important to the family as well as the provider and patient, of course, to have someone in person to kind of respect the situation that they will be encountering. So there are scenarios for on-site in that case, and then for the majority of any other assignment, you would have sufficient coverage with video and telephonic interpreting as well. We're getting some great questions here, so please feel free to continue. And I'll just give it another minute or two. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide at this point. In case you did not have a chance to ask your question, feel free to record the email address on this slide. I want to thank you all for your attention. Want to suggest new topics for our upcoming webinars or simply tell us your story? Let us know at info@effective.com. Again, that's info@effective.com. Thank you all once again for your attention. This is Angelica Mendoza with Effectiff signing off.